What up, folks? Mikey G. Matty Mintz here. It's the Midlife Crisis podcast. We are excited to be back. We are recording this one. It is not live like usual because our esteemed guests are from London, which is not the greatest time when we typically stream, which is like 3 or 4 a.m. But before we get to them, how you doing, Matty?
Yeah, I'm doing amazing. Finally feeling better, bro. I can talk, and it's like I don't cough every 13 seconds. It feels real nice. So actually, days are improving. Good day on socials. I know you saw that, so I'm excited about that too, man. A lot of good conversations. Things are moving for sure. How was your day? How you doing?
Yeah, man, thanks for asking. Everything's been good. It's, my big weekend is I took my wife to see Taylor Swift. Guys, I am telling you, listen, I am not a Taylor Swift huge fan, but that was one of the most impressive shows I've ever seen in my entire life. Like, it was a full-blown production. She sang for 3 hours straight, took no breaks, was in character, choreographed the whole time. The technology was insane. The entire stage was a massive LED, and it was in the new Oakland Raiders stadium in Vegas. So that was impressive as well, just to be in the stadium. That stadium was massive and amazing. So I had a good weekend, man. I was pleasantly surprised, and Vegas is always a fun place to go to too. So
Yeah.
it was a good
I
time, man.
think, one of the things, and you just mentioned it with Vegas, is like, and YouTube or Instagram or any of these little clips with TikTok that go viral, anytime you see somebody who is a master at their craft, it's just enjoyable to watch.
Oh my God, man.
Like I could watch like if you got somebody, I mean, it could be the most kind of like boring, typical thing, but if you watch somebody who's a master at it do it, you're like, man, it's like soothing. You know what I mean? Like your
Oh,
brain's
dude.
just happy with it. You know what I mean?
You learn a lot too, man. Watching people do what they do at the top of their game.
Yeah.
I think you can get a lot from it. And, a couple things I thought about was just the amount of people it took, who she surrounded herself with, how much work it takes to do what she does,
Oh my gosh.
um,
Yeah.
and how hard she works, man. That is some hard work, man. It was pretty wild.
That's
But
cool.
enough about me and my weekend. We got to get on to the guest, man. So we're going to start off with Dan because Dan's at the top. So, Dan, got to get a little bit background before we introduced him. And we're going to start off with this is one of the cooler ways to introduce a guest because both of these guys have some pretty cool accolades. We'll start with the Razor phone. Not sure if you all remember that because most of you youngins that listen to us were way older than you. But there was a thing called a Razor phone. And when it came out, Dan was in charge of global marketing and activation. And it was David Beckham's first kind of big commercial deal ever as well. And then top of that, he did the Motorola campaign where, dude, Dan, you're going to have to give me the name of the square again. I cannot pronounce it.
Yeah, Trafalgar Square.
Trafalgar. All right, there we go. And in the square, they activated a huge music fest for the launch of the phone. And then on top of that, this is another amazing stat. Logan Paul, that little influencer name, when he decided to get into boxing, they made a mobile game and it became the #1 top of the App Store in the US and in Europe. And he was in charge of building the game, all of the marketing and mobile activation as well. And then finally, this is one of the most impressive things I've heard. I've always heard about these really interesting ultra marathon runners, but guess what? Dan's one of them. And here's the stat. Bro, he ran 100K in a day, and it only took him 13 and a half hours. Guess what? After a half hour, I'd be dead. Dan, welcome to the show, man. Such an impressive resume in person already. I can't wait to chat. How you doing?
Really well. Thanks for being here. Really looking forward to chatting to everyone today.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much. And if that wasn't enough, we got another incredibly, insanely talented human in Ben. So Ben has 25 plus years in mobile gaming. He was doing it back when, guess what, people? Phones actually had buttons. and there was a QWERTY keyboard, and you would have to press a button 4 times to just get to an R. That was a true existence that happened before the smartphones, and that's when Dan started working on them. In addition to that, though, because he's been working on it for so long, he's had the opportunity to help launch Square Enix's mobile divisions, which is a really, really cool thing. And this was back when iPhone and Androids were getting started to kind of build their mobile strategy and what they were going to do with it. And throughout that, he worked with Montreal, London, and Copenhagen offices to do more mobile strategy as well. And then when we get to the special fact about Dan, this dude's also an insane human, and he does long water open swims to the tune of swimming between islands off the coast of Italy like Capri. So pretty impressive background and interesting facts as well. Ben, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, whatever time it is, wherever you are. We're based in London. It's, I don't know, is it 3 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 3? I don't know. I have no idea what time it is now, but thanks for having us on.
It's 3 p.m. for me in San Diego, and it's 6 p.m. for Maddie on the East Coast in Florida.
It's 11 a.m. London, p.m. London.
Yeah, so we're going to thank you for staying up a little bit late because we're going to have a nice big conversation, but welcome to the show. I'm super excited to have you. And like I said, I'm going to go back up to Dan since we're going to work top to bottom, and we're going to go right into it. Famous midlife crisis question. How did you get to the seat you're sitting in today, Dan? We're going to start with episode 1, which is your childhood. Have at it, man.
Yeah, my childhood, quintessential British childhood. Grew up in the countryside, spent a lot of time out riding bikes, building dens, everything that you kind of see in a British movie. It was perfect. It was a great childhood, seriously. Playing football, just having a great time. But I grew up in the 80s, so I guess my exposure to kind of gaming was very primitive. I'm sure there's things that I played that people who are watching this have never even come across, apart from in museums. Like the Game Boy. I spent an awful lot of time playing Tetris. That was my birth. That was kind of what got me into this space. But yeah, I kind of grew up very normal life. Mobiles were just kind of coming into it, and I was always the kid that had the cool gadgets, and always kind of showed off with what we'd got. But yeah, really normal childhood. Great time.
All right, man. We're gonna have to do a little critique because we go deep in this show. So you gave us like episode 1/100th. We got
that was like a teaser trailer of episode 1.
Yeah,
what that was.
So we're gonna.
We're making a movie. Episode 1. Here's the teaser. You're very good at like marketing, obviously, because that was a great trailer. But we need to go deeper than the trailer. So let's start this way. Tell us about your family. Did you have any siblings? Your parents, what did they do? How did they kind of impact and mold your mindset growing up? Love to hear that.
You're going deep then today.
Yeah, okay, man. We ain't messing around.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, I'm from a really normal family. Mum, dad, they were childhood sweethearts to a degree. They went to school in the same school and got together after school. They had me quite young in the kind of teens. I mean, I didn't have kids myself until I was way into my 30s. Mm-hmm. So, very, very different spectrums there. But yeah, really normal, childhood. Dad worked in the building trade. Very successful guy, actually. Became more and more successful as life kind of went on. Ended up retiring a couple of years ago. But quite an inspirational figure, actually. Quite a formidable character. Looks a bit like me, a bit stockier, a bit broader. Yeah, he was a very hardworking guy and kind of instilled that into me. We got nothing handed on a plate to us. Me and my brother, a younger brother who's does something in information technology, which I don't understand. He instilled in us that you've got to work hard and make your own way in this life. Mum was a housewife. Did a great job of raising me and my brother, making sure that when we got home from school we had food on the table and MTV plugged in, ready to go, watching all the latest videos back when MTV just showed music. People remember that?
Right?
I know, man. That used to be a thing.
Yeah, crazy days. You see some of the videos that kind of I remember so clearly. And then you hear the music come on now, and you're like, okay, that was 1994, and you're like, it can't be that one.
Right, exactly. It's reaching out, right?
Yeah, and then you ask Alexa, like, when was this first release? You're like, oh shit. But yeah, really, really good childhood. A lot of friends. I was really active, really physically active when I was a kid. Always out riding bikes, playing football, playing cricket.
Yeah.
Cricket is a British sport that people in America will never have heard of.
We have, but very, very rarely.
It goes on for 5 days and it can still end in a draw. I mean, that's the kind of game that it is.
That's wild.
Yeah. I went to school. I left school at 16. Where I came from, not many people went on to the kind of further education path. Not many people went into university. Just wasn't really the kind of done thing where I grew up. You went out and you got a job, and that's what I did. I went out, started working, all sorts of different things. I've had more jobs than you can imagine, from kind of about 16 to 20, all sorts of different jobs. I was a estate agent or a realtor, as I think you call them in the States.
Yeah.
I worked in a bank. I worked in a steel factory. I worked in a diner. I did all sorts of different things. I was just driven to have as much money in my pocket as possible so that I could have the best time possible at the weekends. That was all I ever wanted to do. I followed my football team, Aston Villa, up and down the country. Spent a ridiculous amount of time and money and effort going to games. And then, kind of eventually I kind of started to kind of find my way in my late teens as to what I wanted to do and the path that I wanted to tread. Decided that I wanted to go traveling, went off to Australia and Asia for about 12 months or so. Traveled all around Australia, which was a real eye-opener for me. I'd grown up in a town of about 15,000 people, and I'd been to London on day trips with schools, and then all of a sudden I landed in Sydney. I'd lived at home my whole life. I'd never really cooked myself any food. It'd all been laid on a plate for me, and I said, right, I'm going to leave all this behind. I'm going to go to Sydney. I'm going to go backpacking, put everything into a 40-litre rucksack, and landed in Sydney in August. I was under the impression that Australia was hot the whole year round. Turns out it's not. Sydney has winter. So I turned up like a typical Brit in shorts and a t-shirt, and it was cold. Said to a few Aussies, what am I supposed to do? And they're like, just go up north, just go up north, go on the coast. So went traveling, spent 12 months doing that, met amazing people from all over the world. And that really kind of opened my eyes, I think, at that point, that there was life outside of this little town that I'd grown up in, where I'd had the same friends, doing the same thing over and over. And I kind of did 12 months of that, traveling all over, seeing amazing sights, meeting incredible people. Kind of came back to England, went back to the little town that I grew up in, and nothing had changed. Everybody was still in the same place, in the same bar, drinking the same drinks. And you know what? If I go back to my hometown now, I can still go to the same bar that we drank in when we were 17. and still my same friends are in there, which is great. The world needs people and places like that,
Hmm.
but it wasn't for me. You know, I had to kind of expand and fly, I guess. So I moved down to London, you know, where the streets are paved with gold, and it's full of opportunity. And I spent for a long, long time trying to find those streets paved with gold. And I still haven't found them. So if anyone knows where they are, let me know.
So
Um,
you just did a phenomenal job of detailing episode 1 in a deeper and more colorful way. I feel like you were about to start getting into your career in London, or am I wrong? Do you have a little more?
I was going to break there because I think you might want to.
Right.
Yeah.
Perfect
Yeah.
break. So, and the reason why we ask you to go into a little more details, you said a lot of interesting things there. So we just want to unpack those and get your thoughts, and then we'll go on to Ben after. Maddie, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah. So you were saying as a kid you were athletic. You did have some video game. I totally know what you mean by Game Boy Tetris. That was definitely a phase, I think, for all of us. I still, man, like the pressure to beat the high score just got so crazy. But
Yeah.
um, as you were doing that, you said you described a very kind of a small town vibe as you were going through. You know, like you said, the people are still in the same pubs. Um, People don't really go on to further education. For you, what was it that made you recognize there was something different? You know, it would have been very easy to stay and not go to Sydney for 12 months. What was it? Where would you say that came from? The kind of the spark to say, you know what, I want to see if there's more out there.
Yeah, I've got interesting question actually, and Ben's going to hear more about my life. You know, Ben and I have worked together for 20 years, and Ben's going to hear more today than I think he's ever heard me. But I've got there's a member of my family, my uncle, who he came from a town just next to us, and he trained as a accountant, and he took a job, and then ended up um, working for this company that basically got the rights for Pokemon in the UK when that was kind of breaking through.
Wow.
And it was an incredible job. You can see the videos on YouTube of how they launched it in the UK. But basically, what I saw there was that there was this guy who looked quite similar to me, from a similar kind of place, who'd got this break, and you know he'd got this job, and all of a sudden he's kind of like dealing with something massive, which I'd never seen happen before.
Yeah.
From anybody in my circle. You know, I'd never seen anyone do anything where it appeared on TV or it was on the radio or it was on the news. And I think at that point, when I look back at it now, that was probably the trigger for me that made me realise that, you know what, even though I'm from this kind of quite small, close knit town, there are other things outside of it and there are other opportunities, but you got to go and find them. And I guess that was probably the point. And that guy actually, my uncle, he's helped me out no end over the years in terms of opening up other opportunities and just opening my eyes. But yeah, I think it was probably seeing somebody that I could relate to who did something. I was like, that's, you know, there's life
Yeah.
outside.
Gotcha. So you got exposed to it. I love
Yeah.
that. That's fantastic. And I think there's you know, Mike and I have similar stories. It's amazing just when you step outside of your comfort zone, how the world starts to open up, and seeing different cultures and different areas, and you know, experiencing different languages, how they communicate, is massive for what it can do for you. Let me ask you this. Um, if you were to give somebody a piece, if somebody was sitting there and they're on the verge, they're on that fence and they're like, you know what, I think I need to get out of this town, or I think I want to go explore. What would be your piece of advice to somebody maybe sitting on the fence there who's thinking about it? What would you share with them?
Pack a bag and do it. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? It might not be for everybody.
Yeah.
If you don't try it, you'll never know. And if you've got that, if that itch is there, if you've got the feeling, and I talk about to people about this when they ask me about, you know, I'm thinking about doing this or I'm thinking about doing that in terms of setting up a new business or having a bit of a side hustle. If the itch is there, I just think you've got to roll the dice and have a go and see what happens.
Love it.
I think
Love it.
it's I
Mikey, what
think
do you got?
it's that simple. And dude, beautiful response. Thank you for sharing for that. We find that often that there's a lot of family, friends, or someone in your youth had a pretty substantial impact on you, like you just talked about. But there's also something to be said about um, you might have that itch or realize that you want to do something more, but then you actually have somebody that does it and actually makes it a reality, and you can see and grasp the fact that there are people that can do it, especially that look like you, that are from your town. So I loved how you described that. I think you said another couple interesting things to me. Um, and it's the two things I wanted to touch on, and then we can go to Ben. But the first one was you did mention your parents, specifically your dad, instilled some values in you, which is this hard work, and you saw him work hard. Um, was there anything else that you took from your childhood, or the way your parents were, that you kind of applied to your career, or as you grew up, you look back now and you're like, oh, this experience or what I learned has helped mold me as who I am as a human.
Yeah, there's a couple of things really. The first one, I think it's just a basic principle that I try and live by, and it's manners, and it's just trying, always, it's the tiny little things in life that can make a great day for somebody. Saying thank you, holding the door open for somebody. That's been drilled into me. Being good in a restaurant, being polite. Those basic, what I think are human fundamentals that society is built upon, they were kind of drilled into me. And then I think the other thing as well is probably just being nice, being a decent human being. Those were also pretty. My mum and dad, genuinely nice, good people, and that I've always tried to just, even when things get tough, and you're having a bad day and things aren't going your way, it's really easy to snap at kids, wives, partners, colleagues, but just try to be nice. Try and one thing that Ben and I talk about quite a lot, and we had it up in an office of ours, was just don't be a dick. That was something that we had that I really try and live by. My parents didn't quite put it in those kind of words, but my interpretation of it was just don't be a dick. And those are probably the two things. Manners, they're free, they cost nothing, but they can make the world a difference, and it makes the world a better place. Just being a nice individual, whether you're talking to the cleaner or you're talking to CEO or whoever it is, everyone's the same. Just be nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, I love that insight too, along with the hard work. And um, you know, most of the biggest religions in the world are thought, like, thought leaders in the world. They preach the kindness, and they preach how much uh, monumental that is to being a good person and to being successful in life. It's cool that you got it from here. I actually got it from my parents as well. I had the same. My mom couldn't be more filled with energy and kindness, and it is critical to success. Maddie, anything before I ask my last question?
Yeah, I would just say to the comment about manners, it is interesting how generational I'm starting to notice as I'm older that is. And I think it's something to be said. I grew up, my grandmother lived with us when I was small, all the way up into right around teenager. And a lot of these principles that were instilled in me were from a person who was born in 1913, you know, how you treat people, how, opening up the door for people who are going into whatever it might be. Again, being polite, please, thank you, these basics. And they were just drilled into you. And it's interesting because I know Mikey's the same way. And I see a lot less of that. And I don't see any good come from it when people don't have it. It's only good things happen. Like you said, what's the harm in saying thank you or please or showing a little bit of appreciation? And, in a world that's so technologically connected now with all these different forms of media, it's amazing how you can go out and just just saying thank you, I hope you have a great day to somebody who gives you your coffee can make a difference in somebody's day. And it's just, I think there's a, I don't want to be that old person that says, when I was your age, but at least for me, maybe you guys can give your perspective. It does seem like it's not as prevalent. What do you all think?
Yeah, I would tend to agree. Society, it's not. Again, we're in danger of being four old men on here. Going, it's not
Yeah,
as big
right.
as as it
Totally
used to be.
fine. We can be 4 old men.
We can
Yeah.
be for
We are four men.
I
Yeah.
drop my kids off at school every morning. I'm really fortunate to be able to do that. Every morning I can drop them off at the school gate, and we live in quite a nice area, I guess. But some of the kids, they don't seem to have the ability to kind of look you in the eye and say good morning. Hello, how you doing? So yeah, maybe it is kind of slipping away, but it's up to us to try and make sure it doesn't, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe we just need a please and thank you emoji. Maybe that's what it is.
Oh, we've got GM. GM.
There you
Everyone does.
go. There you go. A little GM. All right, I'll take
There's
it.
a lot of GMs on Twitter. How many of them are genuine? That's the big question. So
You know
one,
what?
go ahead.
I was going to say, do you know what? There's no better feeling though when a stranger or a neighbor or someone in the shop says to you, "Oh, I saw your boy the other day. Such a nice lad." They asked me how he was. So I would say to
Yes.
people, like if a kid's polite to you or whatever, make sure you recognize that and pass it back to their parents, because it's a nice, it's an uber
What
good
a-
feeling.
What a great point, man. I would have never even thought
Yes.
about that, but that's a huge impact on the parents and the upbringing if you get those compliments about your kid. Awesome point.
Love it.
So before we get to you, Ben, one last question for you, Dan. The other thing I think you said was really interesting. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Is you did have that opportunity to put everything in a backpack and move to Australia and travel around. And you said you met a lot of interesting people from that time in your life. Any impactful moments or thoughts that you'd like to share with us that kind of again helped mold your mindset or impacted you in any way?
Yeah, meeting foreign people for the first time blew my mind. Genuinely, people. I grew up in the middle of England, and in English in our school we were taught one foreign language. We were taught French, and that was the lesson that you could go and skip and go and smoke behind the bush shelter, because we were like, well, why do we need to learn French? No, never going to use it in the future. And I went to Australia and I went straight into this hostel with 400 people from all corners of the world, and exposed really quickly to people who could speak lots of different languages, and they could flip between different languages with complete ease. They could go from English to Spanish to French to German. I just remember it just completely blowing my mind that somebody's brain had the ability to do that. And I'd love to say that was an inspirational moment for me to go and learn lots of different languages. It wasn't. I tried, but there are other things that kind of distract you when you're traveling and you're kind of 19, 20.
Yeah.
Namely girls and alcohol and no curfews or anything like that. But yeah, this kind of the opportunity that I had to meet people from different backgrounds, different cultures, different countries, different ages. I just never had that before. When you grow up and you live in the same town whole life, you grow up in the same age group as everybody, and you just get older and older with the same people. And really, there are so many different occasions where you went from town to town on the bus. You'd stay in one place for 2 or 3 days. If you really liked it, you'd stay there for a week or so. I remember there's so many occasions where you're just sitting around a campfire or on a beach late at night, listening to a bit of Jack Johnson and Ben Harper and all that kind of surf music, where you're just having these deep conversations with people that you've never met before, with different perspectives. So it's really hard to say there was one single moment, but just that whole exposure to the world in a single country, it was mind blowing.
Yeah, man, and it's so critical. I think that's the other thing. It's interesting that that's why Maddie and I kind of started this, right? Is we are more connected than we've ever been digitally, but having open, deep conversations like that is not as prevalent as you would think it would be because we're so connected. But when you are in the elements and you're traveling and you're staying in hostels, you're forced to do that because what else is there to do, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And
And
it's
this was
magical.
and this was a time before people spent their whole time on buses and trains and planes looking down at their phones. This was a time when it was there, but we had to go to the internet cafe and it would make the dial-up noise, and people were playing multiplayer Doom in those internet cafes and that kind of stuff.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, they were good times as well. When it was raining, we just went down there and just shoot each other. That was cool. But yeah, there was very little distraction back when I was doing it. So people had to talk to each other. Otherwise, you just sit in a bunk room just looking down at a book. And you can do that anywhere in the world. So the opportunities to meet people, just be exposed to all these different things was amazing.
Awesome. Maddie, any thoughts before we move on?
No.
Okay.
That's wonderfully said.
Well, Ben, thank you for being so patient. On to you. Now I think you got a flavor for what we're looking for in episode 1. So take it away. What was your episode 1 of how you got to the seat you're sitting in today?
Well, I'm going to try and follow Dan. I'm not sure if I'll be able to better him, level him, or just come a little bit under him. But, we're pretty competitive, so I won't make anything up this time just to try and beat him. But no, I was born in 1066, so I'm about 1,000 years old. But no, I grew up in Bath, West Country city, beautiful Roman city. Unbelievably beautiful, and I forget how good it is. And when I go back, I realise it's a tremendous, beautiful place. And my early years was school, where I think I just watched school go by. I don't think I really interacted with much. It was just one of those things which happened around me. But my mum and dad had their own businesses. They had their own old people's home where they worked hours and hours tirelessly all the time, night shifts. I remember vividly that mum would do a night shift. I would get up and have some Rice Krispies, which is probably the best cereal in the world. Sit on the bottom of the stairs and wait for mum to call to make sure that we were up. And I'd be proud to say that we were up, ready for school, had my Rice Krispies, and she'd bring me home a packet of hula hoops on a Tuesday. And on Thursday, I get some Quavers. And on Saturday, I get an Aero. So I vividly remember those times of my treats if I got ready for school.
That's awesome.
But we moved from a kind of like a standard family house to something which is quite incredible, which was something like off a Hollywood movie in some ways, because we moved into this amazing, huge Georgian house, which used to be a hotel. And mum and dad converted it into an old people's home. So I watched them convert their kitchens. They put a lift in the center of the house, built an extension for us to live in with my sister and the dogs. And then one day dad came in and said, things are going pretty well. We've got 13 bedrooms, so we're going to buy the health spa next door. So we bought the house next door, which was so we had 26 bedrooms in the house. So not a lot of kids who were 8, 9, 10, 11 knew what that house was on top of the hill. So I just said it was my house and just didn't tell them there was another 20 old people living there.
That's awesome.
So I had one of those. Do you know the film Big with Tom Hanks?
Yeah,
fantastic film.
I had a bedroom a bit like that, where I had put it this way, my bedroom, the opposite side of the house, had 23 old people having their breakfast and dinner and luncheon. My bedroom was the opposite side of the wall, so I was able to have a basketball hoop and a pool table in there. And I used to ride my bike around there doing skids around my BMX around the pool table until my dad caught me because I'd ripped the carpet. So I stopped riding my bike. But that was good. I mean, like as Dan said, your heroes always your sort of your mum and dad, and they worked insanely hard and built up incredible business until really the recession came in. Dan can probably remind me, but sort of like the late 90s, maybe the late 80s, where value, interest rates, inflation just bombed in the UK. And I sort of like saw the strain of running a business, I guess, on my mum and dad. But they had the tenacity to sort of say, do you know what? It's not worth it. So they built this huge business, very successful, and in the course of 6 months, a year, things had changed for them. But they were very humble and always very humble, and sort of downsized to give me and my sister a great kickstart in life, which sent us off. And there was that side of it, and then also like my dad sort of like took me. I mean, I was a pretty competitive judo sort of competitor and rugby player. So as I was a little bit active, I spent most of my days in the back of his car being taken to rugby training, rugby matches, or judo grading, or judo training. So he had that sort of like fatherly instinct of sort of taking you everywhere, wherever you needed to be, whatever time. Until we sort of had to meet in the middle, where it was decided that should it be judo or rugby? Rugby is basically a man's American football. We don't wear pads.
That's what they say. That's what they say.
There's no, and like we don't stop every 30 seconds. But I started playing rugby pretty competitively. Played for some of the best teams in the country. Did very well. Captained the county, and my dad was always there on the side, driving me around the country. And I think at his funeral, someone said something really nice. They said, "I've never met a man who could say so little with so many words, and so much with one look." And I think sometimes I might have inherited that when Dan switches off when I'm gabbling on about things.
No, that's cool, and I think that was a great. I'd say half an episode one in sharing with the family. I think the one thing I'd love to touch on. So you actually talked about your passions, which were rugby and judo. As far as you building this really cool digital career, kind of educationally or learning and schooling, like were there any things that drove or interest you throughout that time?
Yeah, well, having a hard-working mum and dad, like we got a few treats along the way. So we were the first one on the road with a VHS video recorder, which for those
Nice.
who are listening, go and find one in a museum. They have these big tapes, and you put them in. And my dad and my uncle actually pirated, and now they're both dead. They can't get arrested. E.T. for my sister, Star Wars for me. So we got quite into sort of films and digital. The Atari came very quickly, and I fast followed with Atari ST and then Commodore 64s, and got into gaming really, really quite early. And especially as a completionist, if you want to go into sort of behavioral science, is I had to complete every game. I had to complete every level without losing a life. I had to collect everything on every level until I came so obsessed. I was taken off me for first of all 2 days, then a week, then a month by my mum, who didn't agree.
Oh, right.
But there was, and then we can go on to it a bit later. But in later life, as I went through sort of senior school and sort of like got to sort of starting to do my first commute into my real jobs, I used to watch people, and I still love watching people and realizing what people are doing. And at the time, as Dan mentioned, when people are on trains and not staring at their phones, they were doing Sudoku puzzles, always doing Sudoku. And I remember asking people, "Why do you do Sudoku?" And they said, "Well, it's maths." And I said, "Well, it's not maths. It's logic. It's just it's a code breaking game." And that's how I really got into some of my early game design, of like trying to understand why people did stuff and what you could do in a game to try and kind of reproduce that in a gamified sort of fun, reactive way.
I love it, man. And so kind of a similar question for you. We got rugby, judo, really hardworking parents, cool things like being the first people to get VHS, you're into gaming. Looking back at that whole kind of period of your life, thoughts, learning lessons, or characteristics that help mold you into getting into your career or the way you are today?
Um, quite a lot probably, but no one does it for you. You got to do it. No one gets you out of bed. No one makes your bed for you. No one, it's all about you. No boss wakes up in the morning and goes, "Oh, I think I'll give Dan a pay rise today." You got to put yourself forward, put your front foot forward. It's very similar values to Dan, but I've known him for ages. And anyway, but time is a leveler. Don't be late. Get an earlier train. Walk faster. Don't get a coffee. And if you are late, sometimes just be a bit creative. Don't say, "Oh, the queue in the coffee shop was massive. Sorry, I've missed this meeting." No, miss your coffee. Go to the meeting. Yeah, so time has always been a leveler for us, and I guess talking to people and listening. Whoever they are, if they're a lady in a supermarket or a stranger on the street or a guy in a waiting room. I've had the luck of talking to a million strangers and meet hundreds of thousands of interesting people, and out of all of those, I've found some amazing opportunities and met some great people I'm still working with now and being in contact with now. And given some kids, we've got a guy working for us called Bruno. He's 18. I've known him since he's been 8, and super smart kid. And you'd think he's 25, wouldn't you, Dan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All from just listening. You're right.
Dude,
And listening.
that is such an underrated characteristic, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because listening, especially in this day and age where you're just constantly being talked to, is such a valuable asset. I appreciate you sharing that, man. Maddie, any thoughts there? Because there was a lot of profound, interesting ideas.
So I have a couple things. First is with parents who were, let's just say, a little bit more entrepreneurial, right? I mean, they were business owners, and they didn't have a boss telling them what to do, right? They had to make their own decisions. How is that in terms of an influence? Because I think a lot of people, I know at least a lot of people we've interviewed who had parents who were also entrepreneurs, it can really bleed into, it's one or the other. They either can't stand entrepreneurship, or they can't stand the idea of essentially being plugged into a system where they don't have control. You know what I mean? They like kind of being their own boss or being in control of their environment. Do you feel any tug, any which direction based on that?
No, I mean, I am fully entrepreneurial, own business mindset. I've tried going corporate, and let's say it was really a good experience, and I met an amazing bunch of people and got a huge amount of experience. But ultimately, you want to be driven by your own success and do and win
Yeah.
from what you do and what your team does, not necessarily a spreadsheet from an office the other side of the world saying, "Hang on a sec, you can't do this." And even though I'm happy to make mistakes, Dan and I have made tons of mistakes, and we've thought we've hit the home run when we haven't. We've put stuff out there when we thought it was rubbish, and it's been brilliant. And you can't do that wrapped up in a big corporate as such and have that flexibility. So I think right from an early stage of growing up, I lied about my age so I could get a paper round. I lied against my age so I could work in a burger bar. I used to go to the Chinese takeaway, buy sweet and sour chicken balls, be cheeky and ask for another 5, and sell them all to my mates individually for a profit. I've always been in the mindset of you got to be cheeky, you got to work hard, you got to look for opportunity to get things, and 100%. I didn't actually realize, and probably quite later in life, that mum and dad are sort of instilled quite a lot of sort of entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you see it, and you see it pay off, even subliminally. Like when you talk about like the first VHS recorder and Atari and things like that, even as a kid, you may not recognize it, but at some point you recognize, okay, those things were a part of this success, and not everybody around me had that. Why is that? And it's you realize that there are big payoffs and big risks, but if you work hard and stay consistent, it's worth it. You know what I mean? It's not just hard work for hard work's sake. There's a reward, and there's a satisfaction that comes with it. Let me ask you this. I think it's interesting because they were in a basically they had a senior home.
Yeah.
Um, and I told you some of my profound just revelations growing up with my grandmother and having a different generation that's around you, right? When you're a child, was there any interaction you had with that? In my mind, I'm envisioning like you riding your bike, but then also getting like these cool stories of people sharing like little parts of their life or maybe tidbits of wisdom. I don't know, maybe that was the case or not, but did you get any of that at all?
Every day. I had 23 grandparents permanently.
There it is. That's what okay.
I would sit there and talk to. I remember so many other names like Molly, Ethel, Mrs. Saunders. Some wanted to be known as their first name. Some Mrs. Saunders. Some wanted to be known as Granny. I would, I used to get Kit Kats off them. I used to get all sorts
Sure.
of. Used to get yogurts off them, Munch Bunts off them, all sorts. Um,
So
and I
what's
think
one Oh, go
I
ahead,
think
go ahead.
the thing is, it was like you had to be polite to these people because they were
Yep.
so much senior than you, and they tell you absolutely bonkers stories. And
Yeah.
it was a home where you could go out and they buy me presents and tell me all sorts of bits and pieces. And I sit there thinking, God, I'm so lucky. And then I look at sort of like my kids now, and I think, God, I wish they had a, I wish
Right.
they sort of knew some of their upbringings.
Oh yeah,
A-
that had to be phenomenal.
Mm.
any lessons or anything that stuck with you there? I mean, because the cool part is, you know, that when you get to a certain age, there's no advantage to BSing anymore. You don't care about the fluff. You tend to get right down to like what matters. And I'm just curious, like anything that maybe stuck with you, maybe some influences or lessons or stories that maybe you were like, "Ooh, that one, I'll never forget that." Anything that you could
Well,
share?
from the old people's home, or in
Yeah.
general. So, yeah.
Just
Um.
just from hanging out with people who, like you said, you had 23 grandparents. Just did one of them
Yeah.
say something that maybe stuck with you?
Oh, I mean, they used to tell me things about like when they were in the war.
Mhm.
So obviously, I don't know if you know, but Bath was blitzed in the Second World War, and they would hide it under their dining room tables as their house got bombed.
Yeah. Mhm.
And they would just sit there and tell me about, oh, well, Moreland Road. I go, yeah, 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 and where the greengrocers are. I thought, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, that was all completely blown up. And the cinema that was blown up. And you just sit there and think, God, how lucky we are. I used to think how lucky I was then of not getting blown up and not going to bed wondering whether I had to get under
Yeah.
a table at some point. So there's quite a lot of like interesting stuff came out of them, and like I
Perspective.
perspective, and some of their jobs as well, where they would like be working at 14 doing like quite hard labor jobs, which kind of like resonates more so now when you have teenagers wanting to be influencers and make an easy buck at doing like, I want as much money as possible and I want to do as less as possible.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Mine then was I will work as hard as I can to get as little as I can. It's like a complete society shift. Dan and I talk about this quite a lot around, trying to understand our children and the youth of today of where we were.
Yeah.
But definitely, I mean, they were a hard-working generation, and did it for very small amounts of money. Where our generation at the moment seems, I want everything and I want to give nothing, sweepingly. I think.
So very insightful. Matt, do you have anything else before we move on?
No, I love that. That was
Yeah.
really cool. And I'm sure you could probably just do a podcast just
On
sharing
stories.
stories from some of the things that you heard from these 23 grandparents. And when you talk about that generation, it really just reminds me of the quote, and you all know it, but the concept of tough people create good times, right? And then good times create soft people, right? And then soft people create hard times, and hard times create hard people. And it's just that cycle perpetuates. I don't know if there's any way to actually escape it, but man, when you talk about that generation, those are some hard people. That is for sure. They were some hard people.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for sharing that, man. And I do actually have one question I thought was interesting that you mentioned is And it's kind of similar to what we asked Dan, but any thoughts or advice on you grew up with entrepreneurship, parents owning a business. You said you explored corporate. It wasn't for you, but someone that is younger, that is eyeing down, hey, I have the opportunity to go corporate or really seek my entrepreneurship passions. Any advice or thoughts for that person that's in that moment of time?
Um, I would say get out there, get talking to people, get connected to people, LinkedIn people, like find ins and outs of companies. A really great one is we had a game designer who's now working at Epic. He emailed us from Vietnam. He was on internship at Gameloft, and he gave us a really good covering letter. And we interviewed him and offered him the job a few weeks later. And when I got down and spoke to him, super inspired, smart and inspirational guy. And I said, how many jobs did you go for? And he's like, like 30. He put 30 emails, and they're speculative. There was no particular job. And again, it goes back to no one's going to do it for you. You've got to go out and do the hard work yourself. And it's surprising the amount of when you start talking to people and start being nice to people and start being listening, you'll find out that, your mate's best mate works in a games company. You'll find out by just being nice and people wanting to share stuff with you. And if you could walk around in a hoodie with the hood up, scuffing your shoes, sort of like no one's going to come to you. So like get out there, be happy, be nice, stand up straight, take someone's hand, be on time, and you'll find that it works. You don't need a degree to be on time.
Dude, I love it. And networking is by far one of the major keys to success in life, just like you said.
100%.
Awesome. Well, that was a great conversation about episode 1 too. I want to be cognizant of time as well. We soaked up a lot of time just on but it was worth it. They were great stories. So I still want to get to episode 2, but maybe we can do more of a highlight reel of episode 2. So Dan, I'll start with you. Kind of highlight reel of your career and some of the more impactful moments. You mentioned a couple as I introduced you. Still give us the journey in a chronological order. We kind of ended up that you're back in London, you're looking for gold streets, still haven't found them maybe. But what does that journey look like, man? Up until you find Web3 is where we'll stop.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Got it. So episode 2 started for me when I was about 14. Actually, started off with paper rounds, washing cars, and just trying to generate as much opportunity and money as possible. That was what I lived for. I mentioned earlier I left school at 16. And I flitted from job to job and just didn't find the thing that kind of fitted for me. Went to Australia. Prior to going to Australia, I'd had a couple of years working as a sales rep in the UK, working for a company that created products that you would buy in the gift shops of amusement arcades and tourist attractions. You'd go there on a school visit and you'd buy a pencil and it would have the name of the tourist attraction that you'd been to. It paid well. It gave me a company car. It was everything you needed when you were 19. Free gas, and it was fantastic. Yeah. Went to Australia, came back, didn't know what to do. My old job was available. I jumped back in that for about 6 months, and then the uncle that I spoke about, he came over to ours for Christmas, and I took him to my local pub on Christmas Day, and all my friends were there, and he looked around and he saw something that I didn't. He saw that if I stayed there any longer, I would never leave. And then a couple of weeks later, I got a phone call from a guy I'd never met before, and he said, "Hi, my name is Steve. I've been given your CV by my uncle. I'd love you to come and interview for a job working for me in London. So I went down to London, put on my best shirt, went down to London, did an interview, and he was actually one of these characters, one of these inspirational people. He's still in my life now. I still regularly speak to him. He's been very, very successful. He's an entrepreneur, serial entrepreneur, sold businesses multiple times. At the time, he had a mobile business that was running adverts in newspapers where you could get the latest pop songs delivered to your phone as a polyphonic ringtone, way before the iPhone. If you remember those, the time of Crazy Frog, if you remember that kind of sensation.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, long story short, he gave me the job. I thought I'd got the job on my own merits, but really I'd been kind of woven in by my uncle. And that was the opportunity for me to get into London. And it started to expose me to, at that point, mobiles were becoming more and more common in everyday life, in business. There were still Nokias, there were still heavy phones, there were Blackberries. I remember going and having a Nokia and a Blackberry and running two different phones for different purposes. And I came down to London. I did that for a year. It was a great company. It was fast moving. We were working for News International at the time, so Rupert Murdoch's kind of evil empire. And it was a great exposure to the world of digital. And I mentioned before that I was always the guy that had the latest phone, had the latest kind of technology. And mobile was exploding in the UK. So I looked for another opportunity, jumped across to a company called Mobile Interactive Group, who were really at the cutting edge. And this is where I first kind of met Ben. We used to sit behind each other. And I went in there. I worked for, again, this company was founded by two entrepreneurs. So there's been a kind of consistent theme in the companies that I've worked at. They've been pretty much founder kind of led. They were incredibly fast growing. I joined them when they were about 15 people. I left when they were 120 people. They were doing a lot of the kind of text to TV show voting kind of competitions, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
The iPhone launched whilst I was there. So we started to build out apps for clients because we were the only company brands were working with who had any kind of degree of understanding of what you could do on a phone. It was great. I was working with massive companies across the UK and Europe and the world. And really, it was the moment when the iPhone came in, and that changed everything for me. It changed a lot of things for Ben without kind of jumping into kind of his story. The iPhone, apps, games that came out, the opportunities, it was just it's so easy to take the iPhone for granted now. But what it did back in the day, it changed everything. So I got afforded an opportunity to go to an agency, digital agency in London, where we worked with some of the biggest brands in the world. We worked with the BBC, we worked with Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, Sony, Mr. Bean, all these crazy big brands. And I was picked to run their mobile business, and we help brands get onto mobile for the first time, doing things that we take for granted. So we were building apps that would allow you to check your bank balance, which at the time was revolutionary, and it meant you could close down 500 branches and save millions for the businesses. And that was great because what that company allowed me to do was about 700 people. It allowed me to set up a business inside a business whilst getting paid and taking no personal risk. And I was there for about 5 years. We worked on London 2012. We did stuff with Samsung. We worked with some great brands. And after 5 years, I realized that I was actually generating quite a lot of revenue and income for the owners, and I was getting a tiny proportion of that. And the itch that I spoke about earlier was there. The entrepreneurial itch was there. And I had not long launched a game for Endemol, who look after IP like Mr. Bean and Peaky Blinders and Deal or No Deal, massive TV shows. And I got on quite well with my main contact there. And I said, look, I'm thinking about doing my own thing. I've got no clients. I get on with you really, really well. If I made the jump, would you come with me? And he went, all right. I was like, shit, okay, this is real. So I handed in my notice. I had 6 months gardening leave, and I did some backdoor deals and took a couple of clients. And I started my own digital agency, my own mobile agency. And that was, just got married, just got a mortgage. I was kind of 30 years old. So I did it exactly the point you shouldn't do it. I had to do it. And I knew that was the time for me to make that leap. I did it. I begged, borrowed, and stealed desks off people, moving around offices. But I built that up. I merged it with another company, and we got it up to about 30 people, and it was a decent sized agency. But all the time in that agency land, you're working for clients who have unreasonable budgets and unreasonable expectations. Mm-hmm. And I think it's probably something you guys probably kind of relate to. And I remember sitting in a meeting with one client, and we were running a competition for them about naming the color of their next paint. And I was like, do you know what? At this point, I cannot do this anymore. And we've been building games for Mr. Bean and Sony and all these different brands. I was working with Ben on the launch of Championship Manager, a great football management game. And I had the opportunity to work with Ben, somebody that I've got a lot of respect for and personally enjoyed working with. That's when we started Viker. In 2019, I think it was. So I exited the other business, and we started Viker, which is where we are today, and we're building games and now we're fully Web3. So it's been quite a big journey.
That was a fantastic story. I only have kind of one thought, really, but it goes back again to this kind of leap, right? And actually, you have a very unique, because even though you still did make the entrepreneurship leap where you left, you started a business, you had just got married, that is scary. I'd love to hear kind of your advice or thoughts to somebody that is thinking about starting a business, and the impact you had of being able to have that kind of 5-year buffer where you still had solid income coming in, you were building your thoughts and your ideas. Can you talk about that and advice of how that can help or deter from starting a business and being an entrepreneur?
It really helped me. As I say, I had this kind of safety net where I had a great boss who allowed me to kind of make my own decisions, but he was a great sounding board. He gave me the freedom to make my own decisions, hire my own people. And even when it was quite obvious that I was going to make some mistakes, and afterwards you'd sit down and you'd kind of analyze, and he'd be like, why did you hire that person? That person was always going to be the wrong person. I knew it was the wrong person. I was like, well, why didn't you tell me? And he was like, you have to find these things out yourself. So from an apprenticeship perspective, it was brilliant. But not many people get the opportunity to do that in that kind of scenario. But it gave me the confidence when I did make the leap. I thought I had the right tools to be able to kind of go and hopefully make a success of it to some degree. So yeah, that in that apprenticeship, watching people and doing it yourself in a kind of closed environment where you not everything is on the line was invaluable, absolutely invaluable.
Maddie, any thoughts?
Yeah, man, I think you've had some incredible mentors in your life, which has been fantastic because, I don't know if everybody gets that opportunity. I mean, just start going back to your uncle being able to kind of push you when you may not have been able to push yourself, right? From that opportunity, and then that led you to the man you said who interviewed you, who you said is still somebody you're in contact with today, to the boss you were just describing that was willing to say, I'm going to let you make your own mistakes so you can learn, right? Truly teaching you how to fish rather than giving you a fish. These are massive principles. And what it makes me think of is just it's so important that we as entrepreneurs and as this generation of producing working people remember that to like we have an obligation to help bring the next people behind us and really help them see it because it's so easy to coddle things, it's so easy to like do it for them. And a lot of the times it's because especially as business owners, we're the truth is we're better at it than a lot of our employees, right? It's because we know we can do it better. But to be able to step back and say, hold on here, they're never going to get there if I don't let them make some mistakes. And I just think that was something that really occurred to me just hearing your process because like this has built you into a force to be reckoned with, but it's not by accident. This doesn't happen in a vacuum. We don't just fall off a log and we know what we're doing in business, right? And it's like we have to be trained and you have to have people willing to do that. And in the same way we talked about your marathons, man. I mean, it's like I can't just go out and run 100 kilometers tomorrow. You have to build up to that. And I just think sometimes we don't give ourselves room for that. And I just think it's really, really cool you've had that story and that journey.
Cool. Yeah, no, I've been really, really lucky, and actually today's made me think. I think from all of the influential people that I've had the fortune to work with, I'm still in touch with them, and they do it for nothing. They do it for. I don't even know if they know they're doing it, and I hope that I can try and do something similar with people that are coming up, and will replace
For
us.
sure.
Yeah,
Well,
no,
and to
absolutely.
Ben's point about, when you hear somebody compliment something about your child or whatever it might be, even just reaching out and just saying, "Hey, man," even just a little note, doesn't have to be anything crazy or epic, but just letting people know, "Hey, man, you were a big factor in my life, or you really helped me through this, and I appreciate it." I think that goes a long way because we all need that sometimes. It's not always easy, but yeah, man, I think that's really really cool. I'm excited to. We'll get into episode 3 here, but that was a fantastic episode too.
Yeah. And then one last thought. You kind of gave this perspective of your parents, right? You know, principles they instilled in you, but from a starting a business entrepreneurship mindset, and you're not allowed to rattle off 4 to 5 in your mind. What is your number one key to being successful as an entrepreneur?
Don't be a dick.
All right. I love it. Dude, you know what we already talked about that, but that was very short and concise, and that is gonna be the next viral thing on the internet. So get ready for that. I hope you're cool with that.
So good. That is so good. Man, I
Uh,
like it. One sentence.
what a great way to end that episode too for yourself. So Ben, on to you, man. Same thing. Let's hear the professional career up to kind of Web3 2019-ish where Dan ended.
I'm just trying to think of my closing sentence because I would have. I bet he says don't be a dick. Now he's taking it. Now I've got to think about something else. No, so professional career, it's a fun one, I think. Through university, moved to West London and delivered wine for a big wine company, which I thought was the best job in the world because I got a free bottle of wine after every shift.
Hell yeah.
Everyone's happy to receive wine delivery. Which I thought was absolutely spot on until I took it to a funeral, which was a bit weird because I turned up and went, "Wine's here."
Yeah.
I thought eventually I should sort myself out with a career job, and I had a few ideas of what I wanted to do, and I knew my background, I knew my degree, and I knew the contacts. But in fact, I opened the paper up once, and it said 100 grand, and that was back a few years ago, so that would be more like 200 grand now. and it said, and it was in a company in London. I didn't really know what it did. It was something to do with recruitment. I sent my CV in on something like a Monday. On Wednesday evening, I hadn't heard that. I didn't know when my interview was, because I assumed that if you sent your CV in, you got an interview. So I phoned up about 5 o'clock on Wednesday evening, and a guy picked up the phone. And I said, "Hi." I said, "Hello. I've sent my CV in. I haven't had an interview yet. Can you let me know when I'm coming in?" And the guy laughed down the phone at me and asked me what my name was. And he said, "Can you come in tomorrow at 10 o'clock?" And I said, "Well, I can come in at 11 o'clock so I can get a cheaper train ticket." And he laughed. He said, "I'll see you at 11." And that guy happened to be the owner of the company, massive recruitment company. And walked in, and this sort of like, I guess I was a slightly cocky graduate, walked into the waiting room, the reception, said I was here to see Mike Walmsley and Steve Hamlin. And they looked at me and went, "Why do they want to see you?" And this guy came out and took me away. Had a few interviews, and that interview ended up with them saying, "Look, the internet's coming. We don't know much about it. We've got this huge recruitment company. We move people from South Africa to London to Sydney to Australia to New Zealand. What would you do if you were going to set up an internet business around our bricks and mortar?" So I came up with an idea, and they went, "Yeah, cool, let's do it." So there was me with two mega millionaires in an office, just the three of us in Hanover Square in London, which is quite a swanky area. And I sat there going, "What?" And
That's wild.
yeah, so we that was right in the dot-com boom. So the likes of boo.com, jungle.com, Lycos, Ultra Vista, all those OGs of Web 1, I think that would be, were
Right.
killing it. Web 0, I'm not really sure.
Alta Vista, yeah, it's Web 0.
That none of exists, right? Which is another Web3 thing that people need to realize is not many of this Web3 stuff is going to exist.
Yeah, ask Jeeves. But yeah, so that was a great experience, and then eventually I moved on into mobile, well, digital content really. On the side of always doing that, I was a little bit kind of like aware of what was happening in the digital world. I was in really early, so I was very, very early into affiliate marketing. I did some cheeky hacks then. I used to buy domain names with a misspelling. So I owned some of the biggest web names on the planet at that time as a misspelling. So I just change one of the letters, add a letter, take it out, fire it through to an affiliate account, and I'd be making happy money every day without doing anything, which I kind of like that. But I got into digital content, started building ringtones for monophonic ringtones. So it was just before Dan. There was basically a Nokia 6310 sort of phones. Moved progressively through that. Games came along, content got more advanced. Ended up working for O2, which is owned by Telefonica, huge multinational mobile telephone network and dealership. Worked in their games team, still building my own content, still having my own blogs. Had a video site before. A video site, you might have heard of it, called YouTube. Before that happened, I had a video site. Don't know what happened there.
Damn, you didn't get in front of YouTube. Well, you were in front of YouTube. You just didn't become YouTube. I think Silicon Valley had something to do with that, the whole YouTube thing.
Yeah, whatever. Yesterday's news. And no, and then I was actually at O2, and we started putting advertising onto mobile internet sites. And my boss at the time said, "You know digital, don't you?" I went, "Yep." And he went, "Right, cool, you're head of mobile advertising now." And I went, "What's that?" He said, "Well, at some point in the future, there's going to be ads on your phone." And I went, "That sounds cool. I can see that." So I worked with O2, Yahoo, Google, and put the first banner on a Nokia N95, which was kind of a soapbox phone, which slid across like this.
Yeah.
That was really cool, really, really cool time. And then during that time, working with a load of third parties, met Mobile Interactive Group and Full Screen, where Dan was, and they sort of said, I said, "Corporate life's not for me. I'm not getting on. I'm off." And they said, "Come and join us, be part of the team, and let's grow the business." So I think Dan was in just before me. He must have been like employee 26. I was employee 29 or something. We got to 190 staff in about 2 years. As Dan sort of mentioned, it was mobile tech, mobile messaging, mobile payments, mobile publishing. There was an iPhone division, everything going well. And a contact of I just published one of my first mobile games, which has done very, very well, and still look back and laugh. And a contact at Square Enix actually said to me, "Could you pop in and talk to us about mobile?" And I said, "Well," and they said, "We might even publish your game." And I went, "Yeah, sure, all right." I went down there on a Tuesday, told them all about mobile, told them how to make a mobile game, told them how to live ops a mobile game, told them how to grow the community on a mobile game, told them everything was going to go wrong, everything was going to go right. That was Tuesday. By Friday, they'd offered me a job. They'd offered me a publishing deal with my latest game. I looked around, thought it was a bit of a joke, signed the contract quickly, and started there a couple of months later. And the guy who contacted me from Square Enix is now one of our investors at Vica. So you know, it's good. It's good to be nice to people, sort of thing.
You worked on some good games at Square Enix as well. You neglect to mention that the games that you worked on.
Yeah, I mean, at Square Enix, it's pretty cool. So, you know, I went in there and they sort of said, "Well, what should we do with mobile?" And I ended up working on Final Fantasy, Space Invaders, Tomb Raider, Lara Croft, Deus Ex, Hitman, Mini Ninjas, Championship Manager. Absolutely, some of the biggest iconic games in the. Some of these here, which still got the pictures up here of Sleeping Dogs. So yeah, got to work on some amazing games, and then also transition those IPs from console IP, console games, which had a very firm audience, and translating that to mobile, whether it was a logic game based on the IP or taking a small amount of the narrative from the character-led, story-based IP, and then trying to figure out what can you take from Lara Croft and put it to mobile. So we took Lara Croft, the adventure superhero, and turned into a running game for Relic. So loads of stuff, amazing opportunities, amazing time working on with some brilliant people. Had the challenges of working in a big publisher, which I think they're coming around again for Web3, but yeah, all good. I think as Dan's mentioned, we were launching Championship Manager. We've done a deal with one of the world's biggest football managers, Pochettino, who was former Argentinian player, manager, managing Tottenham Hotspur. We're doing a deal with F2, which is one of the biggest YouTube influencers. Had a guy I know called Dan. He had a digital agency, and I said, "Come and activate this and make this brilliant." And I think that Dan mentioned it. He was working with clients more and more, asking him to say, "Can you make this pop?"
Right.
And I said, "I've been working in mobile for years. I've been working at Square Enix for a number of years. It's taken me 18 months to get a first playable. I think I can do it in 2 weeks. I've got a vision. We had a vision of how we could build games quickly and build a business. And I think I started a few days later, and I think a month later we published our first game."
Dude, amazing story. Some of Maddie and I, literally, when we grew up, that's our childhood memories, right? A lot of Mountain Dew, a lot of pizza, and a lot of Final Fantasy in his basement. So it's pretty cool for you to be able to touch a massive IP like that. Maddie, what do you got, man? That was another cool, amazing story as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, you went through a journey, right? I mean, I think it was interesting. Well, the first thing that stuck out to me is, and this is from, Mikey talks about this with his introduction to Web3, was kind of your introduction to the corporate world, which is, the idea of you sent over, what did you call it? Your CV?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Resume.
Yeah. Resume, right? And then, you just called in a couple days later, like, "Hey, man, what's going on? Why aren't you guys interviewing me?" There's something to be said about that, right? Because I do think that there's, that there's this sense of, and I don't want to say, I think it's overused, entitlement, but like, you have to be willing to work hard and put yourself out there. And sometimes that means being the squeaky wheel, right? Not everything's just going to fall in line for you. And I just think it's really funny because, Mike's introduction to Web3 after doing some mod gigs at some smaller projects, you know, finds out about this thing called, Hate Beast, and just went directly to the founder and said, "Hey, I'm your new mod." And the guy was like, it was like, what did you say, Mike? 10 minutes later, you're the new mod. And next,
Oh, not
a
even
day.
3 sentences later, Digimental, who's now become a good buddy, he was like, "Yeah, sounds great, man. Here's your mod PFP." And 3 months later, there's 900,000 people in the server, and will never be
Yeah.
replicated again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was wild, and that was your. I mean, you went out there and you acted. I love me. You literally. I'll take the 11 o'clock. The 10 o'clock's a little bit, and it's just funny because you went in there, and next thing you know, look who you're around, and look who that puts you in the environment that puts you in. Listen, if you had played by the rules, okay, you might have gotten some entry level job. How long would it take to get into that suite where you're talking with multimillionaires? You know what I mean? If ever. And I just think that that's a big takeaway for people is to recognize that it's like, listen, sometimes it's not about, you're not owed anything. You have to make a path for yourself. And I think that's just an important lesson that's there. And I think it's really cool what that has led you to. So it's really cool.
No, I mean, I say to I interact with a lot of teenagers these days, and I'm involved in a few sort of career things, and sort of, I think it's called Future Frontiers. And I say to them, you don't just press submit and think you've applied for a job.
Yeah.
And how many times have we spoke to people that go, "Yeah, I've applied for 90 jobs this month." And you haven't. You just pressed LinkedIn and went and done this.
Exactly.
Do your research. Make sure you know what you're doing, what you're getting involved in. Make sure you know how to follow up with people. Even social stalk them. Make sure you know everything about that business and the people you're going to be interacting with before you even sort of go in there. And then when you do go in there, I mean, Dan, I'm sure you remember that we had an interview with someone. They were late. They turned up. They sat on the sofa with their hood up. We went over and said hi to him, and he sat on the sofa and just looked up at us and was like, "Yeah." And I think Dan went, "Yeah, okay, I think this one's done for you, mate."
Shortest interview ever.
Yeah.
45 minutes late with no apology. You're like, come on.
But I mean, it's a case of like, if you got to put yourself out there, and when you do get out there, you've got to do your research. And when often like, we've interviewed tons of people, and we say, "Have you got any questions for us?" And they sat there and gone, "No." And I said, "There's always a question. Ask what I had for dinner last night. Come on, interact with us. Let us get to know us." But yeah, it's important. I think it's a really important life lesson, being able to sort of like put yourself out there.
I love that last tidbit about the questions as well. And that's actually what I was going to touch on. Matt kind of touched on it, because another interesting moment that you said was you just made your own game, and next thing you know, you're in Square Enix's office and got a job offer, and you're trying to sign the paper as quick as possible because you think it's a joke, right? Other than, because again, you've had a really cool, successful career that people would kill for, and a lot of people dream and just think, "Oh, that person got lucky," right? Well, we know one thing that you did, which was you put yourself out there and you followed up and you worked hard. Anything else that you would give advice or a learning lesson through that time period in your career?
Oh God.
And it's got to be one. It's got to be one, and it can't be what Dan said.
Well, my one-liner.
Well, it doesn't have to be one-liner. It can be what, but it's got to be one thing that you think is like
one
critically
key to success. Yeah,
Okay.
one key to
success. Don't be scared of failing.
I like that one too. That's nailed. In your own words, because I'm interested in this, what is it about failing, or how did you overcome that thought of being scared of failing? Was it just it happened throughout your time? Do you consciously think about it? Like, what does that actually "don't be scared of failing" mean to you? Because you hear that a lot, right? But I'd like to hear it kind of more in your own terms or experiences or personality?
So I guess, don't get hung up on the failures. So like we've built games, we've done campaigns, we've done like sporting activities. We've tried to do, you fail in everything in life. Eventually, once nothing is perfect. If you are perfect, I want to be you, but then I think it'd be a very boring life. So I think you've got to have the mindset of like, okay, this hasn't worked. I'm okay. Why hasn't it worked? Because we spent too much here. We put too much pressure on ourselves. The deadlines were too short. We feature creeped and put too much stuff in. We got completely obsessed with what we wanted to build, not what our audience wanted to build. Like, you deconstruct a failure and you move on. And I think, there's a mindset of like, if you're scared of it, you won't do it. You won't move forward. I mean, I tell you one, I've got knackered ankles from riding my bike too much, right? I can't run for toffee. Right? I'm scared of running, so I know it'll injure me, but I'm not having Dan do all this running and kick my ass at running. So I will eventually be able to run. That's a physical thing, but I think a mindset thing is like, if you think you're going to fail, you won't do it. I mean, you think about the average Joe on the street, just to say, can you, I think like Mikey was saying, or Matty was saying around the small steps to get to your ultra marathon. If you go out and try and do an ultra marathon, you'll fail, hands down. So I think, the mindset is you'll probably fail, but figure out why you're failing and then to keep going.
Love it, man. That was a great way to expand upon don't be scared of failing in your own words. So thank you for that, man. That was fantastic. So I think now, because I want to really spend the rest of the time on Web3 and what you're doing. Maddie, I'm thinking instead of getting individual kind of Web3 stories, we kind of lump it into one. What do you think?
Yeah, I think especially with time, because we got about 30 minutes, and so I want to make sure I want to get that whole Web3 in there.
Yeah, we want to get the whole Web3 in. So I still want to, kind of, Dan, give us your account of realizing what Web3 is, and now you're going to start this gaming company that's Web3 immersed. And then Ben, I would say just feel free to add in. I think this is kind of a collective question to you both. So episode 3 is finding crypto. We're looking at the Grapes NFT logo and anything in between there. And what's happening present day.
Oh, well, I think, Ben, we're pretty good at doing this, aren't we?
Yeah. So how about I do this? I'll give you a bit of backdrop about mobile games, and then Dan
love it.
And Dan can flow into play and earn, and then what we're doing. So I think that's a good narrative.
I love that narrative.
So from the outset of like new mobile from the iPhone. The first thing was no one's going to play on, console games companies, big gaming publishers looked at the mobile phone and said, no one's ever going to play a game on their phone. And then very quickly, people started playing for games on their phone. Very limited content out there. People very happy to spend $3 or $4 on Angry Birds. And that was when it first came out, and a few other games. And then what happened was Angry Birds dropped down to 59 cents, and the game, the iPhone was born, really. The games and the App Store grew and matured. And then as that happened, people were paying for games. There was Infinity Blade, which was about $10. There was Chaos Rings in Tokyo we launched for fun over Square Enix. It was $15, did 500,000 downloads in the first weekend. Things were absolutely great. And then kind of free to play came along and said, do you know what? I'm going to let you play for free, and you can do in-game in-app purchases for consumables. It worked on Canvas on Facebook. It will work on mobile. And suddenly, almost overnight, that whole premium business model just dropped, and everyone moved to free to play. And then, even though the haters hated it, because you could spend $20, $30, $50, $100 a go in your game, it grew and it became the most powerful business model in sort of games history, if you like. And then with mobile, it got a bit kind of competitive with CPIs and trying to grow your audiences. And then advertising came along. So Ketchup came along and a few indie developers, and hyper casual exploded. And everyone said, this will never work. They're shit games. They're disposable games. You build them in a day. They've got loads of adverts in them. But it worked, and there's billion-dollar companies out there now doing it. And then you sort of come full circle now, and there's been limited innovation on the App Store for probably 2 years. The innovation now is really around taking match 3 and a builder game. So you can match 3 and build a kitchen and stuff like this. So what's happened now is there's a new move, and we're seeing it not only from investment into the whole play and earn and Web3 space for mobile, but also the narrative of the user. I've said that a million times, I'm lucky or unlucky 3 teenage kids. Their narrative have changed over the last couple of years, or the last 6 months, to that can I have $30 for some V-Bucks, or can I have a battle pass which doesn't cost me $20 and gone, to that I've just made $6 this week playing this game. And that the audience will decide, not the people. But from our perspective, we want to reward people for playing games, and I'm going to hand that over to my hostess with the mostess, Dan Beasley.
Yeah,
That was a great quick history of mobile gaming, though. That is going to make some solid content as well. I appreciate that.
Thought the same thing, Mike.
Well, Viker, we started Viker in 2019, but I guess our journey into crypto, and I personally started probably 3 years before that. I think it was when we bought our first, individually, we bought our first piece of Bitcoin. Neither of us have held it. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't be talking to you today. We'd probably be on a nice yacht in the south of France.
So many people have said that same thing on our show. People have bought it for $20. People have bought it for 400, but they're all the same stories.
As long as you didn't buy a pizza for like 15,000 Bitcoin or whatever it was, as long as you weren't that guy, you're okay.
Or through a hard drive in a
Oh.
Yeah. But anyway, so we'd been in it for a while, and we started Viker in 2019. And the thesis that we had around Viker was, creators on YouTube get some of the revenue shared back with them from the advertising revenue that is generated. And our thesis around Viker was actually, is there a space in mobile where you can play games and you can earn? So we started to build out this kind of platform, which allowed us to build games on top of, but essentially looked at the revenue that our players are generating us. And we started to really crudely reward them with dollars. So you could come in, you could play our games, and you'd spend half an hour, etc. inside our games, and you'd start to get 50 cents, 80 cents, $1, $2, $3, $4, to the point where we've got whole families playing our games, and they were generating $200 a month between the kind of family group. And they were, we had 10 million downloads of these games in the space of 12 months. It was really quick success. So what we learned from that really quickly was that people wanted to play games on their phone and earn. There are issues with sending money to people across the world. But what we learned unequivocally was that there was this global appetite to play and earn. And this is before play and earn was even a phrase. Before Axie came in or anything like that. We invented play and earn. That's what we did. But we had this community of people playing. And about that time, we were introduced to the guys at Animoca. We'd been watching with interest what was going on with Axie when that kind of exploded during the kind of, I guess, the early part of the pandemic, I think it was. And everything Ben and I had ever done in our career and everything we were doing around Viker was around the mass market. It had to be available to all four corners of the world. I had to be able to explain it to my mum. That was always the test. And Axie was the exact opposite of that. It was, 50 steps to get into that game and depositing hundreds of dollars and bridging it from X to Y. And we just looked at this and we just thought, you know what? This is absolute bullshit. Web3 in that format is never going to be mass market. And our vision with Vica is really simple. To build the biggest casual Web3 mobile studio in the world. That's what we've set our stall out to do. We're really fortunate that we've got some amazing investors in the studio, Animoco, IVC, Initial Capital. And to this point, we've created 12 games where you can come in and you can play and earn little bits of Bitcoin. We are reinventing the classics. So you've got Solitaire, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, great games that everybody knows and understands. And you can come in, you don't have to deposit anything, you don't have to set up wallets, you can just come and play and earn. So we've got the games side of the business, and that's working really, really well. Where we're going now is really, really exciting. Grapes is very, very close to launching. We've been building it in the background for what, Ben, about 10 months, 12 months?
Yeah, back in summer last year, August, I think.
And I think, again, the insight that we've kind of come from, we're both involved in the NFT spaces ourselves personally. You own a Cool Cat. What else have you got? I can't remember. Cool Cats, Mockers, On-Chain Monkeys,
Olivex,
the normals, all sorts.
No apes though. No apes.
A lot of OG stuff, but no apes.
No apes. But our view was that, again, that we wanted to build something which was really fun, has great global mass appeal, and that can be born in Web3, but actually bleeds out into all different platforms, all different media verticals. Games will obviously be a massive part of what we do. And we want to build this amazing community, great franchise where games are at the center of it, but actually also it goes into TV, it goes into film, it goes into products, it goes into theme parks. It's a big ambition that we've got, but executionally, we're a mobile studio. We know how to build these things. So we're going to have 3 games in the franchise by the end of the year, they're very much designed to kind of appeal to all 4 corners of the world, like everything that we've done before. And we couldn't be more excited about it.
So that was a great explanation of your journey as well. A couple things. Do you guys know the it's not invisible one? Do you know the imaginary one, guys?
Yes. Yeah, we do. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I've got one.
Because if you didn't, I was going to introduce you because you guys have similar visions. First couple questions. Before the one thing that we like to get, which I think makes a really nice sound clip for you all that we can cut together quick to put up on your socials is as you're promoting this is for Grapes and specific for the Grapes NFT in 30 seconds or less. What are you trying to accomplish with Grapes NFT and why am I spending my hard-earned money on that?
Grapes, it's a delightfully fun collection with global mass appeal. I think it's everything that space needs right now. It's going to span all forms of media. Actually, what we really want to do is create digital wealth for the community. That's what we are trying to do with Grapes.
I love it. That's a very perfect, concise answer. And so following up into that, and
I have a follow-up question,
Maddie.
Mikey. Could you do that same thing? Because you said your goal is to be able to explain this to your mother, right? If you were, what I'm curious is, how would you explain this to your mother?
It's the new Angry Birds.
Oh,
there we go. That's what I'm after, right there. Now we're talking.
Now now you have piqued my interest.
Ben just dropped the mic. Okay, I like it. I like it.
That's good too. And so, next question. I'm assuming that the quick answer, Grapes, because you can make them cute. But give us the story about why Grapes imagery. Why did you center in on that?
Yeah, again, we wanted to do something which was not kind of aggressive, not too polarizing, which I think some of this space can be immediately when you look at the art. that is generated. And we wanted to do something that felt inclusive, that didn't necessarily have gender or skin or race or religion or anything attached to it. We wanted to do something which was really universal. And I think, a grape is a pretty universal piece of fruit. And you can have a lot of fun with them, as we are. There's all sorts you can do with them.
No, that makes sense. And then that if you're trying to get a global, it was interesting. We had the Imaginary One guys on our show, and one of the cool things that they did, or one of the things that still sticks in my mind, is they made their kind of base animation, and they went to a massive mall in Singapore and just paid to put their video up on the walking mall, and they just they sat, as the crowd and saw how people reacted, and they said it was really magical to see how the kids and the families just immediately were attracted to the imagery and the animation, and they knew then, like, hey, this can be bigger than just an animated NFT. And it sounds like the kind of the similar type thing that you all are going for as well, so that's cool.
Yeah, the genesis, I think, is born out of, it brings a smile to your face. I can see it sitting on Netflix. I can see it sitting on Disney. I can see it on lunchboxes. It's all, it had to kind of tick those boxes for us. And the Imaginary Ones, we've been talking to those guys as well. I've owned one of their NFTs now for a couple of months, and I just love what they're doing. And it's probably one of the most beautiful projects out there.
Yeah.
It really, really is.
No, absolutely.
Maybe you might see a bit of a collab between Grapes and Imaginary Ones.
Yeah, I think it would be one of the collabs of all the people we've talked to and the people we know. It makes a perfect amount of sense, and they're great guys and have similar kind of stories to you as well, which is really cool. Let me ask you this: you now been into Web3. There's two really interesting questions, I think, for both of you, and it's okay if you go. Let's go to you, Ben, because Dan just started. And if you have similar answers, that's fine. But you have had really cool gaming careers, corporate careers. How do you think that experience has helped you build a project and navigate Web3? Because it is a little different of a beast.
Yeah, it is different, but at the same time, what we think we bring is, we're fully doxed. We don't mind putting our faces on phone calls. We're not hiding behind we're not using our PFP as our profile picture. I think there's a lot of credibility to be added to these projects. There's been a lot of rugged projects over the last sort of 9 months. And if you look at the games you're doing really well, or the projects doing really well, their founding team have got experience and are willing to stand up in front of people face to face and answer questions and go on AMAs and bits and pieces. So I think we've learned from our background that you've got to be a people's person to be successful, and I think that's what we're bringing. We've also delivered stuff between Mr. Bean to hundreds of millions of eyeballs via Dan's background, or the likes of Tomb Raider and Final Fantasy, and even sort of Space Invaders, to like multimedia, transmedia sort of stuff. So we're bringing quite a lot of, I hope, gravitas and experience to the space, and a bit of background that I hope can give confidence in the investees and the communities to say that we're here to sort of deliver something really special.
I love that, man. That's a really good answer. Dan, anything to add, or did Ben take all the thunder and lightning from you?
All the glory on that. I don't think I can build on that.
No, I think that's good, and I think that's one of the things that we preach. We're literally about to make a YouTube video of like top 5 things that you need to pay attention if you're new getting into Web3, and one of the big ones is NFTs are businesses, and if they're not treating, if the founders are not treating it as a business, you should run immediately, because nothing is sustainable. Or why you're going to spend $2,000 on something when people aren't doing anything with it, and treating it like a company, because that's what it is.
I think you'll see from Grapes as well. We want to be the biggest Web2 mobile studio, and we want to onboard many users via many different audience cohorts. So when you look at what we're doing for Grapes, we're talking to effectively a crypto savvy audience first, on getting the initial sort of purchases in and the initial community together. But then we start spreading that Grapes sort of gospel across more games, more apps, more content, and we'll bring more people into Web3,
Right.
via the Grapes pathway. So I think it's a brilliant way of bringing things in. And if you look at other projects, I think that they're already too Web3 indoctrinated to bring anyone else in.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So let me ask you.
you mentioned the main thing, which is the frictionless not having wallets and can still make money. That's so massive, because our moms don't know how to do that, right? And that is the number one hurdle. Maddie, go ahead.
So my question would be this. To the person who is still Web 2, they're not crypto savvy, and you're hoping to get them into your ecosystem, right? What advice would you give that person who's, if they were trying to get into Web3, maybe they're looking at what you guys are doing is like their proverbial, toe dipping in the water here to test the waters. What would you get as advice with everything you have and what you've learned in Web3? What would you say for them to their approach to getting into Web3 with what you know now?
Through gaming.
It could be anything. Just Web3 in general. I'm a person from the outside, and you said this is the next Angry Birds, and you got my attention. I'm thinking, okay, I like the idea of this. What do you got going on? What would be your advice to me? I'm starting this Web3 journey. Where would you direct me? Where would you say?
This is the interesting thing about what we are doing with Grapes, is that we've got a pathway for people to come into it without having to go fully Web3 and set up a MetaMask or set up Trust Wallet or whatever you need to kind of be fully Web3 enabled. The games in the franchise that are going to come will have mixed models in terms of the way that you can kind of be involved in the game, the way that you can kind of progress through the game. So you can come in as a normal Web2 user, as a normal Web2 player, and the experience will be great. You'll be able to kind of do what you're familiar with. You'll be able to, and we do this already in our games. You can come in and you can play and you can see a few ads. You can buy some IAPs, and then you can move along the journey really, really seamlessly. And it's not all or nothing. You can come in and you can do it at your own pace. And we believe that is the way to onboard next generation into this space. If you come in and you ask them to open a wallet and do a secret phrase with 16 different words, you've lost them immediately.
Yeah. Get a ledger and don't connect to anything, but you do have to connect to Mint, and it's like, it's overwhelming.
It's nonsense, and it is getting easier for people, and it will continue to get easier and easier. But we're still a long way away from it being, like connect with Google, or
right?
Connect with Facebook,
right?
And that's where we need to get.
Yeah, no, and I actually love your answer, because most people's answer is go get a Discord, get a Twitter ID, and go down, start scouring and navigating those platforms to figure out who's actually legit and not. And your answer is, we are the answer. Ride with us and learn Web3 at your own pace through our game platform, which is a really cool answer. And that's an answer that is coming from people that are really trying to do something different and change the space. So I appreciate that. Maddie, go ahead.
Yeah, and to add on to that, what I liked about the answer is that what you're really saying is listen, to participate and get involved in Web3, it doesn't require all the things you may have heard it takes to get involved in Web3. And I think that's a massive thing that people need to understand, because the second you YouTube it, what is an NFT, or how do I get a MetaMask wallet, or whatever it might be, a lot of people are overwhelmed, and that's it. They just step away from it. Same thing with Axie, right? It's like you look at what do you need to do, and a lot of people are just like, it's too much, rather than just saying, hey, heads up, by the way, what if I told you you could participate in Axie but didn't have to do all of those things? You're going to have a lot of people's attention. And I think that's what people want is like, give me the softball approach to this.
Yeah,
I
no,
mean,
totally. Yeah.
I mean, I think to override all of that, enjoy it. I mean, if you're not enjoying it, you're not going to be learning. When we went into some projects, we'd spend like 40 minutes trying to create wallets, bridge another wallet, buy a currency we'd never heard of, swap it for a currency we have heard of, only to go and find out that where we were trying to do is sold out already. So when you do come in, enjoy it. Make sure you enjoy when you're not getting confused, and just come and play some of our games, and you'll start earning, and we'll hold your hand through it, and then before you know it, you'll be a billionaire.
Well, I like that you said something very interesting too, which was like find a place in the Web3 world that you enjoy. I think what the point that you just made is most people obviously come in here, it's driven by money. Billions of dollars are being spent, billions of dollars are being made. How do I get my piece of the pie? Oh, I have to do all this miserable stuff. But people like you and other people, I mean, shit, man, Starbucks has an NFT right now, So like it's adopting quickly. Amazon's about to launch their NFT platform. Like it's happening within the next few years. So I really like that point and advice too. Maddie, any other thoughts or questions? So we kind of move on to like the next 6 to 12 month portion of the conversation.
I just a comment, and then we can move on. I was just when you said that, it made me think of, when Mike told me about this whole Web3 thing, he was like, dude, it's a digital gold rush. And I remember the hype, and everybody was so excited, and everybody was like, basically they were getting their shovels, they were getting their pickaxes, and they were rushing out there, and nobody had any idea what to look for, but we were just hoping we were going to strike gold in something, right? And it's really cool because you guys are stepping back with this approach, and what it makes me think of is, every time I go to the beach, especially if it's early in the morning, I'm going to see somebody who's retired or doesn't have a job, and they got their headphones in, and they are just living their best life, moving back and forth that metal detector and just loving life on the beach, scooping up a wedding ring here, scooping up a watch that somebody left there. And it's like they enjoy doing that. It's not a job to them. They woke up early because they wanted to do it. And it's just really interesting because, in a way, both of these are the same. Just one person enjoys the ride, and the other person has made a job out of it. It's just really kind of cool how you guys have phrased that.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, you got to enjoy stuff. If you don't enjoy it, it's not that. No
Yeah.
one's having fun.
Got
So,
to,
yeah.
got to. And that's when the rewards come from it, because then every little victory is a gem. You can sit there and be like, oh, cool. You can enjoy finding a quarter. It's fun. So anyway, it just made me think about that.
So, yeah, all great, interesting thoughts. Kind of one last portion. We have one more question. It's very softball, simple. Will not throw you off. But before we get there and kind of close it out, tell us as much as you can about Mint. When is Mint? What can we expect? And then once we go through that, give us what does the next 12 months for your team and Grapes NFT look like?
It's going to be a very, very busy 12 months. That's for sure. So where we are right now with Grapes is we've been working on it for the best part of 12 months in the background. The platform that we build upon is there, that we use for all of our games. That's owned by us, by Vika. In terms of where we are right now, the website is going to drop later this week. We're going to start opening up Discord in the next kind of 7 to 10 days. The allow list is about to follow that. We've got some massive collaborations which are going to be announced as well with some of the biggest people in the space in terms of projects coming together. And then Mint is going to be at the end of April, early May. So there's a lot that's going to happen in the next 6 weeks. The allocation or the size of the mint is going to be 8,888. I'm not going to reveal the mint price yet, but it's going to be very accessible. This is fundamentally something that we believe in, and we believe we can kind of grow great value, great digital wealth for the community. And I guess once we're done with that, the fun really starts. The fun will start here. And we've got 3 games that are going to drop between now and the end of the year. Those games will be on iOS and Google Play. They're going to be pretty good games, pretty deep, exciting games. And you'll see the breadth and the world that Grapes has inside those games. Ben?
Go ahead.
Yeah, you'll see games. I think you'll see some good digital experiences as well with Grapes. We're not scared of like pushing the boundaries of growing our audience across different genres. So yeah, and some really cool merch. We've got the coolest trainers in the world.
I'm excited, man. Well, thank you for giving us that little insight. This whole Web3 conversation has been great too. It's been good from beginning to end. And so we're gonna any other final words or thoughts about the projects before we ask our last questions and close out about Grapes specifically or Viker Games specifically?
Not for me.
No,
Let me
I
ask
think
you this
pretty-
quick question. What does getting involved in the ecosystem NFT wise, getting one of those 8,888, what does that do for you when it comes to the launch of the iOS or Android platform games? What am I going to get for my grape?
So, really interesting question. By owning a grape, there will be when we ship the games, there will be a kind of special privileges for owners of those grapes inside the ecosystem. But I think what is really exciting for us is the ambition with Grapes and from our experience and how we operate the games. And we're not just generating revenue from NFT sales, we're generating revenue from in-app purchases, we're generating revenue from advertising inside the game. We've got the Viker token, which is going to be launching very fast follow as well. So really, this concept of digital wealth is something that we think is really, really interesting for people that come in very, very early, that we are going to be able to build a significant treasury that can kind of be for the benefit of the community.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, that's the beautiful thing about it is if you find legitimate people like yourself in a world sea of vultures and wolves trying to scam you over in this space, it can become a pretty beautiful thing.
We've all been in those shoes, haven't we, where we've been rugged. We've all had that.
Oh yeah.
Listen, man,
Hey.
I got rugged. I got rugged. I got scammed by a fake OpenSea help desk agent in the OpenSea Discord. That's how much I didn't know what I was doing. But it's, even in, that's one of the things that people don't think about. Like there's big brands, and if they have a help section in a Discord, there are bad people just waiting for people to type, I don't know what I'm doing.
We could probably do another podcast on...
Oh, yeah. It's unbelievable. I think you froze a little bit, but you're back now. All right, so we're going to ask one last question. We're going to wind this down. It's been a very fruitful conversation. I know it's getting late for you guys. I appreciate it. I will start with you, Dan. And the question is very simple. How do you, and I know you've probably sat in on hundreds, if not thousands of spaces or done interviews, how do you think your time on the MLC show went today? Love feedback and hear your thoughts for us, because we're always trying to grow and get better as well.
I think he said he's either on mute. I think he said, I've really enjoyed it. You definitely said I really enjoyed it. Well, Dan, you're breaking up. If you can hear us.
Yeah, I think Dan's on mute, man. I think his internet is.
Might be cutting out.
The internet seems to have finally failed. Well,
used up all his internet. I think
and the internet's gone. Ben, you go for it.
I would say, and I can probably talk for Dan as well, because we work together so closely. I think we both really enjoyed it. I think we're both quite surprised. I think the format was great. I must admit, I sat there and listened to Dan thinking, I didn't know that. Yeah, no, it was really good. And, you know, I thought initially when I thought 2 hours at, you know, 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. London time, I thought, but it's absolutely flown past. It's been a pleasure. And I think, you know, smart guys, got lots of insight, and obviously you talk to a lot of people and garner things. So, you know, hopefully we can be back and report in a few, you know, in a couple of months to see what.
Dude, absolutely, man. I appreciate the kind words, and that's the feedback we've been getting, and we will cut some video up for you, and you know, we built a friendship online. I'll let Matt say his closing words. I'll say mine, and we'll call it a night. How about that?
Just got a text message. I've got a message. Wi-Fi has died.
Yeah, totally cool. We'll close it out.
Worries.
We'll close it out with you, and we'll call it a night.
Yeah. He's in the VIP lounge, if that means anything to you guys.
He's in the what?
Oh, VIP lounge. We can get him back.
Oh yeah, bring him back real quick.
If we
can.
Yeah. Give me a second. There we go.
He's back, baby.
He's back.
Okay.
Is he back?
Yeah, we got you.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Well, Ben kind of took your thunder while you were gone, but any other words? He gave us some very kind words, and the question really is, how do you think the experience went? There's a lot of this going on in the Web3 space. We like feedback and thoughts, so feel free to give them, Dan.
I've really enjoyed it. I've never done one this long and this in depth, and it's took me into places I haven't been before. And I think that's great. I think that's really, really good. It's made me think, and hopefully you guys have enjoyed it as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And thank you for the feedback. That's our goal here, is to really, like we said, we weren't lying, bring back the lost art of genuine human connection. And I don't think you can do that without going deep. And we hope we do you a service of being able to give you some video clips. And now you'll have a recorded podcast to really humanize you guys. So as you promote this, people can listen to this and be like, okay, Dan and Ben actually are the real deal. Because they've built companies, they've worked for the likes of Square Enix, they launched, you know, Beckham's first live activation, and those are all good accolades to have for somebody that's building an NFT company. So I'll let Maddie say his closing words. I'll say mine. We'll call it a night, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, to your point, listen, you guys said you're not afraid of getting in front of the camera. You guys are already doxed. You know, you already have a track record of success. But it's easy to just pass over that and not really truly understand its significance, specifically in this arena, right? Like you said, you mentioned hiding behind PFPs, and then you just said, you know, using your PFPs. But the truth is this, is that you are marketing to a Web3 audience first. And a lot of that audience right now is kind of lashing back from their wounds of trusting people they probably shouldn't have trusted.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And we have tried to anesthetize ourselves to that by saying, oh, well, now we're doxxed. And so just because I see your face, somehow now I can trust you. Right. And what Mike and I try to do is by going in depth, by taking 2 hours and saying, who are you? You know, where did you come from? What are you passionate about? Tell us about your career. This is more than just you're not using a PFP, right? You are two professionals. You have a track record of this. You have a tremendous amount of success that's brought you to this point. And more than that, anybody listening to this podcast is going to be able to say, okay, you're not just falling off a log and expecting to launch a mobile app that's going to help people earn, right? This is something you guys have already done. You've demonstrated success in. You're building networks and partnerships and have an insane network already behind you to be able to pull off of. And I think that's a massive, massive thing that gets um, understated very easily in this space. And so I really enjoy getting a chance to hear your all stories. Like I said, I mean, you guys have had incredible mentors, incredible experiences, 23 grandparents. Not everybody gets that story. You know what I mean? Not everybody gets to hear that. And I mean, yeah, man, you work for Square. I mean, you guys have put things together. You're working with teams that anybody would hope to. You've hit a lot of these bucket list things that people would hope to have in any professional career in tech. And you're taking that and you're bringing it to this space in a way that people can understand and it's not intimidating and scary. And so it seems like a very, very good recipe for success. So I was really happy to be able to spend time with you guys. I can't wait to see where it goes. I'd love to have you back on in the future. This is the beginning of a friendship and see where this is going, man, and see, get a follow up on how things are going. So that's what I think. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's do it. Let's do episode 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, I will add Matt always does such a great job at those closing comments. Of course, everything that he said, I'll reiterate the friendship, man. It's just a kind of a magical thing. We built a friendship over a 2-hour podcast. We have a big, robust network. Our network is your network. Let us know anything that we can do to continue to help you out. And then I always like to definitely, in your guys' case, just sharing and being vulnerable and really showing your human side. That takes a lot of courage and strength in general, knowing that anybody can hear this too. So being vulnerable our content is not as good if people like you don't open up. So thank you for trusting us. Thank you for feeling comfortable enough to do that. And this, like Maddie said, man, this is just the beginning. You guys, I think, are going to put something pretty nice together, and we cannot wait to win together and join the ride, man. So you all have a fantastic night.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. And with
Thanks,
that
guys.
being said, people, Midlife Crisis is out. We'll be back on Thursday. You all have a great night. Gentlemen, we'll talk to you later.